Patrick, what's your take on that just before we get to Jonathan and hear his perspective as a mentor? And then I want us all to collectively take a look at a video that relates to all this. Patrick, what do you have to say about all this?
So for the audience at home and the panel, Michael, taking things out of context. I said I am a human and I have road rage. And now he called me king of road rage. So scratch that from the record.
You don't scratch this from the record. I'm in the host chair, young man. So this is on the record.
Anyhow, let's reel it back in. So the point about this is I spend too much time on Instagram. I love cheesy quotes. One of my favorite relating to this topic is people often won't remember what you said, but they will remember how you feel. So I think that is so crucial when learning how to apologize or even realize that you may need to apologize. And, we have mentioned ego and being prideful, as men of color, especially men, period, because we were socialized to be proud. You need to acknowledge and validate the person that you may have hurt their feelings. When I think about right and wrong, there's many instances where right and wrong is just black and white. Well, yes, I am right, and yes, you are wrong, or vice versa. And there are many instances, especially in our world, right and wrong is so subjective. What am I to say what is right or what is wrong depends on your context, the situation that you are in, and who is involved. So when I think about learning to apologize, I think about the first step is you got to validate the person that you are talking to. I am sorry that you felt hurt. Regardless of whether you did something wrong or not, I am sorry. I apologize for hurting your feelings, because regardless of what happened, their feeling is valid. And you need to acknowledge that, and you need to help them see that you acknowledge that before your conversation can go any further. Without acknowledging that the other person feeling is valid, there's no point to your apologizing. Because anybody can say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And then once you have acknowledged the person's feelings and acknowledge that their feelings were hurt, then you assess your own feelings and the situation itself and figure out what went wrong here and how can we fix it.
Let the record show that Patrick totally skirted the question that I asked him. It was eloquent, it was beautiful, but it was not what we asked. Thank you, Patrick. Jonathan Murry is a Hawk Institute mentor. Jonathan, take us same question I have for D'Angelo. Can you recall a situation where you were mentored? You had a mentee in front of you, and you knew the short answer. Maybe like D'Angelo, it wasn't officially through that capacity, but in any role, you got a mentee in front of you, and you know the answer is, or the very probable solution is just an apology, and how you went about kind of encouraging that person to apologize.
Well, it was basically I got him to really understand the other person's perspective and why that other person was really hurt. And how would he feel if somebody did the same thing to him and they didn't take his feelings into account? But with a lot of kids that I know nowadays, it was having him to swallow his pride and his ego. And once you give him to swallow that, or not even think about his pride or his ego, they might be able to break down and do what you want them to do. But sometimes it's hard for some kids nowadays, because some people think if I apologize, people look at me as somebody soft or something like that, especially men or females of color. They always look at it as me apologizing is me being soft. But after he apologized to him, they had a better relationship and a better understanding, and they was able to talk more. And by him just apologizing, they was able to come to common grounds and come to a common thing of being together.
Yeah. Appreciate it. You just said that the nature of that relationship. And Dr. Carlos, I'm going to call on you to kind of give us an overview of what you just heard. I love having a mental health clinician here, because Dr. C just sits back and listens to all this, and now I can see the gears turning, Dr. Carlos, so I'm going to pull you in. But I want to share a really quick story, because we talked about modeling behavior, and Jonathan, you talked about the relationship being better. I talked about my dad earlier, and the proudest, strongest willed Black man in the history of the world is the man who raised me. So coming up, he never apologized to me for anything. Now that might not have been the best modeling of behavior. I never heard him apologize to my mother either. So I never heard him utter those words, but I became a dad. I got married really early. My wife and I at the time had a kid, and this was at the time when secondhand smoke was just becoming, we were learning that what could happen to children. Patrick, you're a physician's assistant, just exposure to cigarette smoke. So my wife and I decided we didn't want to have people smoke around us. My father was a chain smoker. One day he came over, I'll speed this up. He came over, went to light up a cigarette, and I said, dude, you got to take that out on the porch. You can smoke on the porch. My father said, no. I'm not going out on the porch. If I go on the porch, I'm getting in my car and I'm going home. I said, that's your call. I would love you to stay, have your cigarette for 2 or 3 minutes. You're visiting your granddaughter, but you can't smoke that in the house. He storms out. My mother storms out after him. They get in their car. The next morning, my father called me, which never happened. So that was my clue. This was something different. If he talked to me, he had my mom call me. My father called. What are you doing later? Nothing. Are you going to church? Yeah, probably. Why don't you come by and pick me up? I want to go to church with you. My father never went to church, y'all. So I should have known. I'll speed this story up. After church, he wanted food. We get to his house. He says, let's come in the family room, have a family discussion. And I'm thinking, oh, this is round 2. This is it. So I have all this anxiety. It's not my stomach. That man sat down and looked me in the face and said, Michael, I was wrong to storm out of your house just because you told me to have a cigarette outside. I raised you to talk. I talked about my roof and my rules, and now you're a grown man with your roof and your rules, and I should have respected that. And instead, I got mad and stormed out and missed an afternoon with my granddaughter. So I am sorry, and I hope that you forgive me. And I cannot tell y'all. Now, my father's been gone 20 years now. I got a little choked up as I got into that story. That meant the world to me, and it significantly changed my relationship with him because I got to see this hugely prideful, strong Black man admit, yeah, that was a little jacked up. And even my mother, they had been married at that point probably 34 years. My mother was even shocked to hear him say, her eyes got big, and she's like, what did you just say? The whole family was like, what just happened? So that's what can happen if we can put pride aside. My dad, my daughter was probably 15 or so when he died. So he lived another more than 10, 12 years. And our relationship never was the same after that. And it became much richer and much more, I don't want to say loving, but much more meaningful to me that he was able to admit. Dr. Carlos, chime in on any one of what any of us have talked about before we take a look at that video. What do you think?
You guys are speaking gold. Seriously. I mean, as small as the phrase apology or I'm sorry is, it means a world of difference to people. Not just to the person that's making the apology, but to the person that's receiving the message. So, thank you guys for being open and sharing. Everything's on point. Patrick, you laid it down. Mindfulness, be aware that you did something wrong, validate those feelings. I'm terribly sorry. I even take it one step further and I say, hey, instead of saying I'm sorry because I'm a horrible person, I just throw in that word out. I'm sorry. I take it one step further and I say, hey, you know what? Can you please forgive me because I wronged you? And it's something different and grabs their attention. So yeah, great job. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate that, Dr. Carlos. Mustafa, before I see in the chat you wanted to add something that I didn't mean to talk over you. Something you want to add before we take a look at that video?
Sorry to interrupt you guys, but that reminded me of my youth when I was a little younger, when I was about 9 or 10. I used to help my dad around cars all the time. My dad worked his entire life on cars, and I usually try to learn a few things here and there, and I learn from computers. And man, oh man, we get into heated arguments. Sometimes they last weeks, sometimes they last hours. And my mom usually is the referee. What we learned is that tables are off and the kitchen is off limits when we argue. So we don't argue there. We usually argue in the garage. Sometimes it gets into yelling. And I mean, I know his point of view. He's been he's working on his car his entire life, and he doesn't want a person who's 10 years old who just started working with him a couple months ago to correct him on something that he knows what to do. And sometimes he explains it to me, and then even then, I know I'm in the wrong, but I keep going. And so I learned to apologize at an early age. But the thing is, sometimes we keep going even after we know we're wrong. And sometimes we just got to stop, think about it for a minute. No, see their point of view, how they view it, and say, you know what, I am sorry. I see how you're viewing it, and I am sorry for doing this and that. My mom was usually trying to was the referee again. Sometimes she tries to explain it what I'm trying to say, and sometimes my mom explains what my dad is trying to say. We don't really speak well to each other. Sometimes we don't know how to apologize to each other, but usually our acts reflect that. And you know what, you're right. I am sorry. And sometimes if you're like getting heated with an argument with someone who's younger, just be the bigger person and tell them, you know what, this is how I view it. This is from my experience. This is what I see, and that's what you're doing wrong.
Mustafa, I really appreciate that. And did you see? I'm curious. Have you looked at the video that we're about to look at? Have you seen it already?
No, I have not, sir.
Okay, then you are clairvoyant, because something you just said suggested to me that you've already seen this video. You referenced sometimes we let it go on too long. So keep that thought in mind. Mr. Mustafa has a career in broadcasting. I can see that's a great teaser, Mustafa. Take a look at this video if you would. It's only about 4 or so minutes long, but this gentleman talks about needing to ask for forgiveness and how potentially things went a little longer than they should have. Take a look at this video, and then our group will be right back.
In the year 2009, my father passed away. He was a patient of Parkinson's disease. Suddenly one morning, I just got a call from my mother saying he's gone. I remember when I was in university, for 2 years, I did not speak a single word to my father. We had some differences of opinion. Loving father, so upset with him. I did not speak a single word with him for 2 years. And just before I came to the Hare Krishna movement and joined the monastery, just a couple of months before that, my father came and fell at my feet, putting his head on my feet, crying and begging, "Son, please, speak to me." I remember ignoring that request. My mom said, "Son is your dad, don't do that to him, please." And just because my mother said, I started talking to him. And in a couple of weeks, I left home to become a monk just after I started talking to him. Every single year, from the year 1996 until 2009, I went home to see my parents. And I wanted to say, "Sorry, Dad, I shouldn't have done this to you." And whenever I went home, there's this 3-lettered word called ego that told me, "You were right. Why do you have to say sorry?" I remember that word ego. I just couldn't say it. That morning, when I received a call from my mom when my father had left, even in the year 2009, just before coming here to England, I'd gone to see my dad thinking I'll say sorry. I didn't. And he had really turned very, very much appreciative of the work that I did, was asking for the recordings of my talks and all of that stuff. And I got back from England, and in just a month's time, I received this phone call. He was gone. I went for the funeral. I remember putting my head at my dad's feet for the one final time, dropping a few unseen tears who nobody would ever know until I told the story to you. And with those tears saying, "Dad, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done this to you. I shouldn't have done this to you." You never know how long people are with us. And you cannot take a chance to mess up with the most amazing experiences of love just because something happened. Ladies and gentlemen, forgiveness is the foundation of a meaningful, deep, true relationship. To let go if somebody has hurt us, and to say a sorry if we have hurt somebody, and letting things go is what makes relationships profound, meaningful, and deep. Which is why I say, when you say a sorry, it doesn't mean that you are wrong. It just means that you value the person and the relationship more than being right. You have to choose. What do you want? Being right or love? And if you want love, sometimes you have to say sorry, even if you are right.
Can't wait to get back into the group and talk about that video. I thought so many parts of it were so incredibly powerful. The overall theme is we don't have a, my older brother talks about a ticking clock. We've all got a ticking clock. We don't know how much time we have, but time is running out. No matter how much time you got ahead of you, it's running out. And so if you know that you've wronged someone, it behooves you to get in there and apologize.